I see people who go about their work, about their relationships, and about competition in a type of way. And I think as long as you take a positive attitude towards any one of those factors in your life, you get so many constructive things out of them. So I see lots of people, but the thing is, when people see people's personal lives and they don't live it very healthily, the way they have a relationship, the way they communicate in that relationship, you see that it's not becoming a positive thing. In competition, same thing. Competition can be such a positive factor in a person's life, but you see it kind of ruin lots of people's way of living. You've seen those people when they're at a competition and they don't do well, they're freaking out, they're going into like a dark hole. It's hard for them to come back from it for a while. So for me, competition has always been a thing to make me push myself to become better. And that's why I got into competitive flying, is I wanted to learn how to fly fast. And the best pilots in Brazil were at the competition. So that's why I started doing the competitions. And I just learned so much from them. And for me, it's always been a positive thing. On the days that I bombed.
That was Richard Pethigal, and I am Klaudia Bulgakow. Welcome to My Life Talks. Let's get started. Hello. Okay. Perfect. Vision there, waiting for Richard. Perfecto. Richard is there. Voila.
Okay.
Yes! We did
Hola,
it!
Klaudia. Let's try
Hola!
see if this angle's a little better.
Yeah, I'm gonna put you. Yeah.
Okay. Getting comfortable here. All right. Is that good?
Awesome. Yeah, looks good.
All right. Salute.
We actually broke the promise.
Uh-oh. Already?
Yeah. You know what you're supposed to drink?
I got my Shimahon here, but that's in the morning, huh? This is already afternoon.
Some Argentinians are drinking all the day long. So yeah. Let's see.
I drink in the afternoon. I don't go to sleep tonight.
Really? Is it like this so strong for you?
Yeah, I'm not that much of the caffeine person, so.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's you're taking care of it. Okay, so I'm gonna suggest that we're gonna straight jump in to the talk, and those people who will connect slowly, they will connect, and if they don't, then they can always see a replay on YouTube and ask questions below, and we can come back to that and answer those questions. So
I get to send it to my dad, and then.
Yeah, he will get to see you finally.
Cool. Everything I always do is in Portuguese, so he never wants to watch anything I do because in Portuguese he doesn't understand it. So doing something in English, that's cool for him.
So he'll be happy. He will be happy.
Yes, for sure.
So as I mentioned with Michael, I will say the same thing today as well, is that many of the World Cup pilots are known, but only for us. And I would like to use this time we have that we don't see each other and that we don't compete. First of all, of course, to catch up with each other, and as well to bring some of the World Cup pilots closer to the other pilots and show the personalities and show their way in the sport. So That's why, for me, you're one of the most colorful personalities in paragliding. I
All
was
right.
always
Thank you.
having you in my eye since I've seen you, especially with
Cool.
your
Good to know.
rituals with the smoke before flying, and I would
Yeah,
push you
burning the Palo Santo.
Yes, I have them. I've bought them.
Good.
I really like the
I
smell.
hope that's one of my big contributions to the flying community, is that everyone's burning Palo Santo nowadays at the PWCs.
Oh, imagine the smoke at the takeoff.
Well, I
All
mean, I burn
130
it at the competitions. I'm probably the only one who that does a smudging session at the competitions. But I think nowadays lots of people actually have it at home and they burn it at home. So I know a few pilots that, they won't do it on launch, but they're at home burning it. So that's cool. That's definitely something positive for a lot of the pilots, I think.
Okay, that's cool. All right, so I would like to jump in. As I said, like even when we're competing, we usually meet in very loose condition. Most of people take it as a time off of the everyday life. So the topic of everyday life and very personal stuff is not coming up very often. And we are usually speaking about flying or gear or some philosophical stuff, and we don't really know each other that much. So I'm super interested in your way in flying. Like, when did you start to fly, and how long you fly, and when did you start to compete, and like if you could bring us closer your story in the sport.
Yeah, cool. So I started flying in '99. So I'm coming up on a little over 20 years now flying. And I started in, my first flight was in Lima, Peru. That's where I learned how to fly. I was a rafting guide in Cusco, Peru. Yeah,
Oh
pretty
my
funny
God.
story, yeah. I don't know if you know who Juanito Ortiz is. He was in Argentina.
Probably.
Well, anyways, yeah, so he was on a rafting trip with me. We became friends and I was guiding the trip. And so he invited me to his home in Lima to teach me how to fly. So I spent 10 days in Lima and he taught me to fly there. And so that's where it kind of started. And maybe for like 10 more years, I continued the rafting and the flying. But then after 10 years, I kind of just left the rafting and only been flying now. So the flying kind of took over my whole life.
Wow.
Which before that, the rafting took over my life with surfing, Before that, I was just surfing. And all I wanted to do was surf. But I got into rafting and whitewater kayaking, and that became my life. And I completely forgot the surfing. And then the flying took over the rafting. So but I think a lot of people do that. You kind of fall in love with the sport and it just dominates you so much. You just kind of leave the other sports behind. Huh? So that was kind of my ladder of going through the sports. Huh?
Yeah, but you started with something else, no? You mentioned something about football before. I just put a light on.
Well, yeah. So you were asking me like when I started, doing sports and trying to be healthy. And since I was a small child, I was playing real football, which is soccer. And I don't know how the Americans got away with stealing that name. But anyways, that's another story.
But that's American football,
Yeah, I know, but I don't know where they got that. And they use their hands, so it has nothing to do with football, So yeah, I played since I was a small little kid. I played in college. I played football in college. I was on a California all-star team, and we toured Europe when I was 16 years old. So I think I played a month and a half in Europe in tours and tournaments there, which was really cool. So I've always had that, aspect in my life of trying to be an athlete, competing, staying healthy. So, you were asking me when I got into that, but it was always my lifestyle was being an athlete.
All right. You have it in your system since small.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what I'm saying is I've always had a competitive nature since I was young, and that kind of helped me get into. I competed in rafting and kayaking also, and then I started competing in the paragliding. I never got good enough at surfing to compete in surfing, unfortunately, because that's a cool competition scene now.
Yeah, and what is for you being competitive? I was mentioning about being competitive on my psychological talk on Sunday, and I think every person have own definition of being competitive.
Yeah, so competition for me, I think competition, the way the way each person takes competition is the same way that people take everything in life. I see people who go about their work, about their relationships, and about competition in a type of way. And I think as long as you take a positive attitude towards any one of those factors in your life, you get so many constructive things out of them. So I see lots of people, but the thing is, when people see people's personal lives and they don't live it very healthily, the way they have a relationship, the way they communicate in that relationship, you see that it's not becoming a positive thing. In competition, same thing. Competition can be such a positive factor in a person's life, but you see it kind of ruin lots of people's way of living. You've seen those people when they're at a competition and they don't do well, they're freaking out, they're going into like a dark hole. It's hard for them to come back from it for a while. So for me, competition has always been a thing to make me push myself to become better. And that's why I got into competitive flying, is I wanted to learn how to fly fast. And the best pilots in Brazil were at the competition. So that's why I started doing the competitions. And I just learned so much from them. And for me, it's always been a positive thing. On the days that I bomb out, on the day of the competitions, I don't have a good competition, I don't have the joy that I have when I do good in the competition, but I come out of that competition having a good time, and I don't come out of it with a bunch of negatives. I don't come out with it like, in a dark place. It's always going to a competition to me, as long as you're flying. I have some competitions where you travel far, you spend a lot of money and there's no flying, it's raining, it's dumpy conditions. That can be a full bummer. But as long as I'm flying and having that thing of competing with my friends, with the other pilots, it comes out to a positive thing for me. And that's when we're giving like workshops on competitive flying and everything, that's one of the big things I always stress with the other pilots that are learning to compete, is that you always have to take a positive experience out of each competition. Even if you don't do well, you got to learn from your errors that you made and turn it into a positive thing. Because if you're that guy who's going to go to competition and doesn't do well, because the best pilots in the world always have bad competitions once in a while, and if they come out of those things negative, they spent the money, they spent the time, they didn't fly well, and they go back home, ranting and raving, what a horrible, this bullshit, blah, blah, blah. That's not what it's about. You got to have a good time even when you don't do well, in my opinion. And that's what I tried to do.
How did you got that to that point? Did it started straight on like this, or you've learned it through the process of your career in sport?
Well, I think because since I started competing as a young child, I think I've always been very competitive, and I think how your parents bring you up, that says a lot about you when you're young. So I never had a negative thing from my parents about competition, about winning. It wasn't always about winning. It wasn't always about, me having to perform at a certain level. It was always kind of, I have to do my best. And I think my parents weren't great coaches as far as competitiveness, but they weren't negative. So they always kept it in a positive life. It was always something good. It was always something we looked forward to. My weekend matches with football. And, so I never had a negative thing on me when I was a child as far as competing. So for me, it was always a positive thing. It was something to look forward to and have a good time. And I think what I'm saying is competition isn't any different from your daily life. If you're a person that goes out in your daily life thinking positive, turning all the situations that the day gives you into positive things, then you're going to be that way when you compete too. Probably the people who take away competitiveness or competitions and take like a negative look on each one when they do bad or when they don't have a good time. I don't know, but I'm sure they're doing that in their life as well. You know, so what I'm saying is competition isn't any different from your personal life, from you know, your personal relationships. I think the people who live a positive life are enjoying the competitions in the same manner, you know, even when it doesn't go your way.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. Oh yeah. So coming,
and I need to be that way because it's been a few years since I've had a good competition result-wise.
I just remember you like one of the comps where you were really not so good. It was like travel all the way to La Reunion and the wing was not performing at all. And for somebody who was coming for so far and doing even more longer trip to get to La Reunion and then having a wing which is not flying and you are still keeping a good spirit and you were like, well, I've got the good wing for many years and this time it's not good wing. So what can I do? I'm here and I'm going to enjoy the island.
That's fun. That's funny you talk about Reunion Island because I was more like I went to the competition and it's a long trip to get to Reunion Island. I was working in Turkey at the time, so it wasn't that bad, and flew down there. And I didn't have a good comp result-wise, but you know, it's such a beautiful place. How can you not like enjoy it?
Yeah.
But the thing I was most pissed off about was there was like a good swell came in like on the third and fourth day of the competition, and we had a couple of days we couldn't fly. And the day the swell came in for surfing was on good days we could fly. And it was all, I can't believe we have a TAS. If we didn't have a TAS, I'd go surfing. One of the best waves in the world is in La Reunion. It's an amazing, and it was just going off. It was so big.
But with many sharks.
Yeah. But that's the thing is there's so many sharks that no one's surfing, huh? You would have got a lot of waves. I would have got a lot of waves of myself. And I think only like in the morning, like 2 people went out and surfed and it was pumping and it was beautiful waves. I was more pissed off about that than the competition conditions. I think it was me and Andre from Africa do Sul. He was all, oh man, look at those waves. He was dying to surf too.
I think that comp came Neville with the stand-up paddle. No, it was not that comp. No, he went on pre-World Cup.
Yeah,
but he came. Neville like for one of the pre-World Cups, Neville came with a stand-up paddle, and because he like they believe this is more safe.
Yeah, it's a lot better. It is a lot safer with the sharks with the stand-up paddle.
Yeah. All right, coming back to your flying. So you started to fly in 1999 in Peru, and then you've continued in US or whatever you.
No, I really, all my flying took place in Peru and in Brazil. Back then, I'd go to the US maybe 2 weeks a year just to visit my dad. Yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, so basically since 90, I came to Brazil first in 91 and I studied here for a year at the university. I did an interchange program. And so after that, I went back to the US, finished my university at UCLA, 1 more year, worked for 6 months, saved up money and moved to Brazil. So I moved to Brazil in 93.
Whoa.
And since then, before 3 years ago, the maximum I'd spent was maybe 3 weeks in the US. I'd come up and visit my parents and maybe catch some Grateful Dead shows. That was, and maybe do New Orleans Jazz Fest. That was it. And then about 3 years ago, my dad's gotten to a ripe age and he went through some cancer the past 6 years. He's doing better now. He's been a year out of that. But so about 3 years ago, I started working your guys' summer, our winter down here in the US for 3 months in a year up in Sun Valley, Idaho, doing tandems. So basically before that, I didn't spend any time in the US. I was just Brazil and Peru. So all my flying was off of Peru and Brazil, for sure.
So first cross countries and first comps, everything in Brazil and Peru.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And
it was really, I was really fortunate because I live in Santa Catarina near Florianopolis, and I had a really good friend, Everton Seco and Sergio Garganta, and they're really good cross-country flyers, and Everton was a good competitor. So, you know, I became friends with them and kind of tagged onto them, and they just taught me a lot about how to fly, you know, cross country and fly fast and everything like that. So, and I also live by Cecil, who's, you know, he's the cross country god for the whole world. He was the first pilot to ever fly 400 kilometers. But then Will Gadd, a half hour after he landed, Will Gadd passed him and got the record that day in Texas.
By how much? I don't remember. Like few kilometers.
I think like
no?
like about
10.
20 kilometers.
Was it not
No,
410? The Will Gadd record?
Was it? I don't know. I think it was at least 10 kilometers. I don't remember really well.
Something like this, but not much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I was living maybe 15 kilometers from Cecil, and then I also met him, and he was like, "Wow, Cecil," you know, I was beginning to fly and everything. It's like, man, I'm around all these great people, and I started tagging on them, going to competitions. So, you know, I was very fortunate in that sense. Huh?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Cecil is a big name in long distance flying world. This guy dedicated basically his life to break world records.
Yeah, and his name actually should be a lot bigger. Like, he doesn't get the credit actually that it should. So like I said, he was the first person to fly 400 kilometers because he crossed that 400 mark before Will Gadd did. Will Gadd was maybe 20 minutes behind him, I think, on that flight. So, and he went up there to Texas without anything. He didn't have sponsorship. He didn't have a lot of infrastructure and everything, you know. Yeah. So for him to go do that was amazing. And then all the flights in northern Brazil, he was the guy who was always there, always pushing it, you know, making it happen in Brazil. So, you know, he needed to have a little bit bigger name of the stuff that he got. He missed out on some of the record flights when he wasn't with the group, or he bombed out early on that day. So yeah, his name should definitely be a lot more higher up there.
Yeah, maybe this is a little bit our job to bring up these names, you know, like in some history, paragliding history books.
For sure. I'm always there to promote Cecil.
Yes, because definitely, like, for me, meeting him and hearing his stories, and him like the year after, like, I don't want to go too deep in that, but like he tried Texas and he said it's nothing for him, because you just wait in this airfield place, and with those frustrated guys, and you can't do anything else and wait. And now it's like he said, he preferred to do it in Brazil, and he wants to do it again in Brazil, and he did it, right?
Yeah.
So since we are speaking about,
no, go ahead.
It's funny.
Well, I was going to say it was funny because maybe about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, Bruce Goldsmith came out with an article in Cross Country Magazine about the world record spots for long distance, you know, and he said Texas and South Africa were the places. Australia got on the map early, but it wasn't a place that would make the final flight of 500 kilometers. And he said Brazil, they're just working it so hard there, and it's a great place, but because of the time problem, because it doesn't have a long sunlight time there, you know, because it's close to the equator, he said he didn't think that Brazil would ever be the 500 kilometer plus mark, you know, and now it is the place. and
now everybody goes to Brazil.
He did say in that article, he did say, I hope, Frankie, you proved me wrong.
Frankie didn't. No, that Frankie didn't. That was the other
in that article. In the article 10 years ago, Bruce Goldsmith said, I hope Frank proves me wrong about Brazil not being the spot for 500 kilometers. And I don't remember. Frank was with the first 500 kilometer flight, I think, but he wasn't with the second one. The one that's the record now, he wasn't together on that.
No. So since we are speaking about record flying and you are witnessing all of this, could you tell us a little bit more about the style, this Brazilian style of flying records, which is actually was criticized in the past by some other record hungry people, and now it looks like everybody's following this path.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I never heard about anybody criticizing team flying. But that's interesting if someone was, because, you know, in the PWCs, everyone knows that if you're team flying, you usually do a lot better as far as, you know, making a task and everything. Not that back then you had to, you know, fly with the gaggle like everyone has to nowadays. But, you know, if you had 2 or 3 of you broke apart in a PWC task, usually you could do really well taking different lines and stuff. So I'm surprised someone was criticizing that method of long distance flying.
There is a lot. They're taking away the credit. They're saying this is a team record, not solo record, you know. And even now, even last fall, there was this guy on the hang glider who broke the record, and he was flying alone, you know. This hang gliding pilot, and same time there were guys flying on paragliders, and he broke the record, and everybody was like, yeah, you know, but he did it alone, not in team.
Is that the one in Brazil, or are you talking about Dustin in
Brazil? No, this in Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, there's not really any way to control that, I think, as far as if you're team flying or not, because you might be flying by yourself, but you might have some people flying around you that can help out with the flight. I think they should concentrate more on separating the fact of whether you tow up for a world record or whether you mountain launch. I think they should put a distinction between those two, because there's a huge advantage to towing up for a world record compared to taking off from a foot launch place. Huge advantage.
How you see it this way? Why you see it this way?
Well, at least what like Rafael was telling me about, that when you're flying like near Tsushima, like this year they towed up, or last year when they did the last record, they towed up and then went over to the mountain and soared that till everyone got towed up and then took off together. If you were taking off from the mountain, you have to deal with a lot more stronger winds up at takeoff than you have to on the ground below, and a lot more difficult situation to get off that mountain, you know. Whereas you're towing up, it's a lot easier just to get off the ground. So you can, with the tow up, you can, it facilitates you getting off the ground in stronger winds, basically. Another thing is you're able to maybe in the future follow a condition, which is starting, like, let's say you're at Tsushima and the last 2 days, the conditions have started maybe 30 kilometers off to the south or something. They weren't starting at the mountain very early, so you couldn't take off too early to get into the condition. So you decide to drive over that place with their tow up gear and tow up over there to like kind of follow the condition. So I think in the future with towing, you're going to have a lot of people kind of chasing conditions, you know?
Yeah, for sure. This is what they do in Australia.
Yeah. I'm sure they'll do that. You know, they do that in South Africa too, you know, so you have a lot of area where you can chase conditions. So just the tow up just adds a lot of features to make it easier to get off the ground and into good conditions for a record cross-country flight. So in my opinion, I wouldn't be worrying about team flying as a differential thing. I'd be worried more about separating tow flying from foot launch.
Well, that's what is very special for me on Brazilians, is that they are team flying. This is one thing. There are many people team flying, but they land together. I mean, like those who survive till the end, it's not that, oh, I'm going to do 100 more meter more, 500 meter more, you know, 1 kilometer more. And they are always trying to land the same place and have the team world record for those people who work for that, like got the furthest, because there's never only 3 people in the air when they are trying, right? There are always some people with them who just landing out on the way. But this is very special, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a little bit of morality when you're team flying, because 95% of the work during the flight is done during the beginning until the last 10 kilometers of your flight, you know? And so what happens if you did all that work together and then the last 10 kilometers, there's a team of 3 and 2 guys are kind of pushing in the front, and the guy behind gets a little bit better line because he's following them. And then all of a sudden they land and he goes 2 more kilometers, you know? So I think that's just a basic, anyone who's going to be team flying is going to land together. because you don't want that's ripping somebody off. You guys did all the work together, and then the last few kilometers, someone's going to take off, get a better line, or to get lucky and get the last thermal of the day and go a few more kilometers. I don't think anyone who flies together is going to do that to the other guys. But basically, I know with their team flying, they already have that like written, signed in a I forget what you call it in English, when you get the official signature with someone who like stamps it and says that's an official contract. Yeah. I think that's in their official contract when they team fly, that everybody lands together.
Really? All right. Yeah, that's a very special thing, and I really like to watch it. What is the other thing which is super interesting for me is, since you observed it since beginning as well, this huge rapid evolvement of Brazilian pilots to the very high flying level, even if we don't see them much now in Europe. Because of course, for most of Brazilian to come to Europe and compete here in 2-3 events is quite a lot of money. So we don't have a huge mass of Brazilians competing in Europe, just few. But when you go to Brazil and fly any competition where there's a lot of Brazilians, the level is just so high, and it's not slower in any means than the normal World Cup. Even I would say one World Cup I flew in Castella, and there was not many European pilots, but mostly Brazilians. It was actually faster than I would say the normal World Cup. So I'm curious how you see where is this racing level coming from, and how did they manage it? Because in Europe we have basically only French having some system, and the rest is kind of struggling with raising of the national level.
For sure, it's part of a system. You see what France does with the federation and everything. I mean, they have so much support from the government, and we don't have that from the government. But we created a system maybe about 10 years ago, which was a League of Competitors of Brazil, and we did a lot of incredible work with it. But basically, our story in Brazil begins with probably Frank Brown. Frank for so many years was a dominant pilot on the PWC, and at that time there wasn't really anybody in Brazil that could touch him, but he was always an inspiration for all the pilots here in Brazil. So I'd have to say that it begins with Frank. And it's funny because Frank, he never won a PWC, he never won the Worlds. I think he got second in the Worlds once. But the thing that's interesting about him, for about 5 or 6 years when he was flying for Jin, for 5 or 6 years, he was the #1 pilot. If you take those old 5 years and look at his results at the end of the year every year, for 5 years, no one had that second, third place that he was at for 5 or 6 years consistently until Maurer came along. So Frank was really killing it outside, but he never got that thing where he won the event, unfortunately. But as far as Brazil, his influence on the Brazilian pilots was really huge in the beginning. And then when we started organizing this league, we would sit down. We had a commission. I was part of the commission. And we were just sitting down all the time, trying to figure out what's going to help our community. And it wasn't just the competition pilots that were competing already, but we were looking at what we could do for the future pilots coming in Brazil, and to get them to compete, to get them to be, motivated to go after it. And the thing about Brazil, if you see the surfing industry today, the Brazilians are dominating the competition circuit.
Definitely, yeah.
I mean, they're just killing it, So we come from a country, we're very competitive here in Brazil, and so we already have that part. And after that.
So where is fucking Medina in paragliding?
Well, hopefully he's about to surge, huh? But we have a good crop coming.
You have a young guy. You have this young hot shot.
Yeah, we have a few, not just one, but we have a few. We got our eyes on him. So but it's a process. here in Brazil,
Don't,
like, you know, so you're asking
don't
like,
break him.
I can break him. We have something that's good for us here in Brazil is that you can fly all year round. You know, so in Europe, most of the pilots during your winter season are skiing and hanging out in the snow. You know, we can fly all year round here in Brazil, so that's a positive. What does kind of make it difficult for us here in Brazil is that we don't have the technical flying like you guys do in the Alps. Any pilot coming out of the Alps is just a monster, you know, as far as taking on difficult conditions, strong, turbulent conditions, you know, so that part, you know, we don't have in Brazil, but we do have flying all year round. And because we have a, you know, usually easier flying that's not so turbulent, our pilots can get onto comp wings pretty early in their career, you know, and not, you know, be worrying or being scared about flying comp wings. So that's another positive thing we have here. So anyways, going back, our first influence was Frank. I think he inspired a lot of people. We organized the League of Competitors in Brazil that started working really hard to making the competitions correct, making the competitions happen in places that would like benefit the evolution of our pilots here in Brazil. And another thing I'd like to say that probably helped a lot in Brazil would be Ari, the owner of Soul Paragliders. Since 20 years ago, he was making paragliders here in Brazil, and he was helping competition pilots that didn't have money to buy gliders. You know, he'd give them gliders, he'd give them a glider and let them pay over 20 months, you know, monthly payments for 20 months to pay for the glider. So he facilitated a lot of pilots didn't have any means to pay for competitions, for gliders, to get them on the glider, get them competing. And we have some really good pilots now that started out like that. You know, Samuca's one, Vermelho is another one who started out like that with Ari helping him. So, you know, that really helped a lot of pilots get into a position to compete as well. So there's a bunch of factors, I think, that motivated, that helped the pilots in Brazil come along, and we're getting there, you know. We're not the dominant force, but we have a good field, I think, of young pilots coming up. We have a good field of experienced pilots still kind of hanging in there. And I'd also like to say it's not just Brazil. You know, I think Venezuela and Colombia have incredible pilots, you know. But like you said, coming from these countries, it's sometimes a little more difficult to have the means to go and compete in Europe, which is really important to get that experience.
Well, but I feel like Brazil in numbers is still dominating the Latin American space, because for sure Venezuela, Colombia, Argentina, even Chile, Peru not so much. Mexico have amazing pilots, but they are just like few. They are amazing, but they are few. And Brazil have by number a lot. And I think what is helping as well in Brazil, for sure, it's a huge country, so it's easier to get the numbers. And the second thing is that you have a lot of local competitions going on. I mean, like how many comps are going on in Brazil over the year, just in Brazil?
Yeah, so, but I mean, that goes back to what I was talking about Soul with Ari, the owner. He's the one who like, he made a lot of competitions happen. He sponsored the competitions. He made I mean, does Italy have a paragliding company? Does the US have a paragliding company?
Italy have a harness.
A harness, yeah. They have Woody Valley, but they don't have a paragliding company, you know? US does not have a paragliding company. So it's really, you know, it's incredible for Brazil to have a paragliding company. I mean, that's amazing. You know, and Ari did that. And he really helped out. You know, he wanted to make money, of course, but he always had a focus on competitions. He always had a focus of helping pilots. Frank Brown flew Soul for maybe, I think, 6-7 years. You know, and he was flying these.
He got this break between Gene stories.
Gene, yeah. So, you know, him, Cecile was flying Soul. Rafael Saladini. Rafael doesn't need, you know, Ari to help him out, but Rafael was flying Soul. You know, he was taking on the cause of a Brazilian company. A lot of the records, the world records, were done on Soul gliders. You know, so Ari really pushed the envelope as far as creating competition and pushing pilots and helping pilots out to compete. So I'm saying we have a big population in Brazil. The whole country you can fly in, you know, all the way down to the southern border with Uruguay, all the way to the northern Amazons, you can fly in Brazil, everywhere. There's not one place where you can't fly in Brazil. So everywhere you can fly. And you had this company that's a national company from Brazil helping pilots that have difficulties getting gliders to get gliders, you know. So that's what really pushed the envelope as far as us having so many pilots that fly. And, you know, the more pilots you have flying, the more chance you get that diamond in the rough.
Yeah, awesome.
And our Medina is coming. It's not Medina anymore. It's Italo Ferreira. That's the guy.
This shorter guy, right? The funny guy who he just won some World Cup stuff with this crazy style.
He won the whole year. Yeah. He
won the whole year, and he's really funny. Yeah. He's this crazy,
totally cool guy. Yeah. He's just cool. I mean, like, you know, Medina's amazing.
He's not this kind of Roldanillo, or what his name is, a football player from Portugal.
From Portugal, yeah.
Portugal, like, you know, oh, I'm so cool. No, he's just like,
Medina's kind of that style, you know. I think everyone likes Italo because he's like, a really down-to-earth, cool guy, you know. Yeah, exactly. Hanging out with Neymar.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just tell you that Zoom gave us some extra time, which is super awesome. They just removed our 40-minute limit because in 1 minute we should have finished.
I guess they like our conversation, huh?
And definitely we're gonna put it on YouTube, so we can dive deeper into this. How you see, like, because I know you created, like, or Rafael created this this scholarship program for some pilots.
Yeah. Instituto Decolar.
Instituto Decolar. Is it the idea of Rafael, or is it the league?
No, it was the league. Was always searching for something like this. We always talked about it'd be good for us to have somebody financing, you know, because obviously without money, it's hard to get somewhere, you know. And Rafael created the Instituto Decolar, and which, you know, was amazing. But, you know, the whole thing is, whenever you have a situation with a bunch of money and everything, and you know, for 2 years, I think it went you know, it was going really well and everything, helped out a lot of people. And I think the Instituto isn't there anymore, but I think Rafael is going to continue to do what he was doing, just not having it as an official, you know, organization. That's all.
But Marcela is a little bit product of this Instituto, no?
Yeah, she is. A few pilots are. You know, Samuka was part of it. You know, you know, the Institute paid for the super final when we went to Colombia, so we all got money for that super final from the Institute. Marcela definitely got help with it. A bunch of pilots did, you know, and you know, it's the same thing where I think maybe Seoul was kind of disappearing from the competition scene because they didn't cross over too well with the E&D hot and the CCC certification. They weren't able to cross over to that, so they kind of went out of the competition scene. And so I think the Institute came in at a good time for that, because all of a sudden Brazil had a space that was missing in helping pilots that had a difficult time in the competition scene money-wise. So definitely, yeah, it was an amazing thing that Rafael got going. Initiative, yeah. Thanks for helping me with my English. So
you speak more Portuguese now. How is your Russian?
Right now. Привет.
Not many guys know, but
that's about it.
Not many guys know, but you having a beautiful, a lovely Russian girlfriend who is a pilot as well.
I'd love to hear that. I'll pass that on to her. Yeah.
She will see it on YouTube. Since I've seen her first time, I always found her very spectacular. So lucky you. Congratulations.
Yeah, she's an amazing woman. She's looking at me right now saying, "You better say that, Richard."
If you
Yeah,
don't say
I'm,
it, you don't eat today, and you sleep on the couch.
yeah. Well, I'm actually the cook. Since I had a restaurant for 12 years, I'm the cook.
Hmm.
I like to cook.
That's interesting. Okay, that's good
Yeah.
that you started the topic about eating. Because this was our big conversation in Argentina about this all healthy lifestyle, and um, you having a very own vision about this all, life and and eating and holistic approach to how to be happy in your life. So you've turned when you still were playing football, right? So it was like kind of your
No,
way.
it was after, let's see, well, I guess it was during college. I stopped eating red meat. And so when I stopped eating red meat, I started researching a little bit about nutrition, and, a big problem nowadays, and always has been, I think, when people go vegetarian, is that they don't study about nutrition. And so
Mm.
society doesn't really have it set up to eat well if you're not eating meat, because, everyone's always worried about proteins, but proteins aren't the big thing. The big things
Where
are
you get
vitamin
your
D.
proteins, dude?
Everything has protein. The problem is, which are actually made up of amino acids. The problem is vitamin B complex. That's the difficult one to get in the vegetarian world.
B12.
And a lot of people don't know that. Yeah, B12 is the big one, but the whole B complex is important, the 5 and the 6, because those are the things that kind of glue the amino acids together to form a protein. And so, I don't want to get into it, because there's nutritionalists you'd rather listen to that can explain a lot better. But what I would like to say as far as nutrition is, I've been, pretty much ovolactic vegetarian since I was 22 years old. So, it's almost 30 years, around 30 years of that. And, it's evolved in different stages during those time. I went back to eating fish maybe 3 years ago, because my B's were a little bit low. But the only thing I can really say about that, as far as an athlete, and I would like to say, is, first off, I think every person is a biotype. You have a certain genetic thing inside of you, how you should eat. So I think each person has to find what the diet is for themselves. I think if you can get away from the red meat and even the chicken industry, it's better for the world. If you are living on a farm and you kill your own animals, I don't see any problem with that. I think that's great. If
Or
you
you
want
can
to feed
have
yourself like
access,
that.
or you have
Yeah,
access.
exactly. If you have access to healthy meat industry, it's okay. But the main meat industry is pretty disgusting. I eat eggs. I try to, whenever I'm at home, I'm getting my eggs off a farm right next to me. So I get whole eggs from healthy chickens and stuff like that. When I'm traveling, it's a lot more difficult. But I think everyone should just have a little bit of consciousness about where your food's coming from, how that food goes into you. If you want to be an athlete, I think you need to research a little bit about it and experiment what actually makes you feel better when you're training. Because most people, I think 95% of people in the world, they just follow the diet that mom and dad taught them, or that they kind of grew up around with their friends and family until they are like 16, 17 years old. And very few people go out and actually try to feel what happens when this type of food goes into you. So there's definitely people can talk about nutrition a lot better than I can. But I think one thing I can contribute is go out, experiment with food, study about food and nutrition, and experiment with what different food diets work with you. Because there's a lot of good stuff out there. Nowadays with the internet, it's so easy to find everything, And the main problem with vegetarians that I see is most vegetarians just stop eating meat and they don't research about how to eat well. And I see a lot of undernutrition vegetarians, and meat eaters love to say, look at that vegetarian, he's not healthy. And it's kind of like, yeah, they didn't study about nutrition and they just cut out the food. They're not eating healthy. Just because you're vegetarian doesn't mean you're eating healthy. So I think the important thing is eat healthy, and you got to research about how the options you have out there and what's gonna go good with your biotype.
Yeah, exactly. because I know even some people who are like, what did I say before? I know some people who are allergic to meat, so that's why like meat proteins. I have like at least two friends, so they are vegetarian not because of choice, because of like necessity. And
Hmm.
I have some friends who went vegetarian, but they were so undernutrition, like because they just overcooked everything. And I think this is the huge problem what we see. And and just bad name around this, you know. It's like when I look at you, you are nothing, like you're totally, you're not this kind of sensitive feminine guy who most of people see as a vegetarian guy. And
I'm
you are
working on my sensitive part. I'm working on it. I'm trying to be more sensitive. The
call me when
vegetables
it's
aren't doing it.
call me when it's happened.
No, I got a sensitive side. I don't always display it, but I got a sensitive.
Yeah,
I
but you
cry
like,
at movies. I cry at movies.
aww.
But
Alrighty.
anyways, in our field, just talking about this is with flying. If you're going to compete and stuff, I think I've talked about it a lot with people at competitions. I think a lot of competition pilots go to a competition and think they can party and not think about this or other things as far as the competition. And I like to see nowadays at competitions for the PWCs, I see a lot more people getting more serious about taking a competition seriously, about what they're eating before, about how they're training, and not becoming a big party away from the wife while they're gone for 10 days and a big party vacation, the competition. Because lots of times the competitions were a big party vacation.
I don't
And
know when did you start to compete in the World Cup, but my first World Cup, it was that. Yeah, I like, I was super young, so I was for sure doing everything what my heroes in the World Cup were doing. We were partying till 4 or 5 in the morning, and then at 7 we would go to take off, and we would fly the task. When you go for a World Cup, you won't probably see much people at 10 on the street because they're already in bed because they want to be fresh for next day task.
yeah.
And with that, I think comes that we fly much faster. You have to be focused to fly on the speed and present. If you are tired and hangover, but you can't keep up, and you are dangerous for our others, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, there's always those people that can party until whatever they want and they'll still do good. And people will use that. They'll use that as an argument to like, it doesn't matter. But I think if those guys or girls, if they focused a little bit more and made their life a little bit more holistic, I think they would do a lot better than they do right now. Huh?
Yeah, definitely. So
Sure.
do you, like, switching from nutrition, you do a lot of sports still, like you do hike and fly, or like what do you do apart of just flying and tandem
flying? I
mean,
I'm always hiking and stuff, and I got my kit and stuff, and I'll hike up mountains and stuff to fly. But and I got a couple tours now that I'm organizing for Brazil, and also for foreigners to come to Brazil and do some hike and fly here. And I'm also organizing some tours in Europe for Brazilians to go and do the Alps. Basically, just doing kind of like the X-Alps route that I did in 2011. So I always want to, if I'm going to work with something, I like to like throw in something that I've had experience with. And so since I did the X-Alps and I've done some nice hike and flies and stuff, that's kind of like what I want to incorporate in my tours that I'm doing. But still, basically 70% of my financial gain during the year is coming from tandems. So that's kind of like still my main focus, but I'd like to branch it off more into the tours. So hopefully I can get those going.
I think this is like, Brazil is not the known destination for doing hike and fly, and it's a very interesting.
We got some incredible spots that haven't been like. I'm actually here right now waiting for the weather to get better to do one, and I've had bad weather for the last week, unfortunately, because I was all set up to do a really nice one, but got kind of unlucky with weather. So I'm just sitting here. I'm still in Baixwandu, waiting for the weather to get good, but it's not helping out so far, unfortunately.
Nice.
I did fly yesterday though.
So connecting with this trips and hike and fly to Europe, you did this amazing project with Off Channel. For those of you who don't know what the Off Channel is, maybe you could explain a little bit what is it and what the project was last summer.
Yeah, so Canal Off is a really nice adventure, not adventure sport, but a sport program here in Brazil. They're usually inside the skateboarding, the surfing, and other things, which is really cool. I mean, everyone loves this channel in Brazil because they always have like really cool people doing it and doing cool things. And so fortunately I had a project since the X Alps. I had a project with Red Bull here in Brazil to try and go climb Everest and fly off the top. And I had that project for 3 years. They never sponsored. They said every year, yeah, next year we're going to do it. Next year we're going to do it. It never happened. So then the guy at Red Bull, he was a hang glider pilot. He said, hey, let's try and get it on Canal Off. But it wouldn't be Everest because it's too much money. So we decided to do a hike and fly program for the TV channel. And I had this producer that did some really nice programs here in Brazil, but he never got it going. He never got it accepted through Canal Off. And then finally, Marcio Pinto, you know Marcio, friend of ours.
Of course.
He called me and said, hey, I have a really good producer that can probably get it into Canal Off. So I gave them my project, and he put another one also in with that to do another part of Brazil. And we got accepted. So finally we got a TV program, which is kind of like a reality program of us. And we got 13 episodes. And we were going to do it in Brazil, but last minute they decided to do it in Europe and decided to do the X Alp kind of route that I did during 2011 X Alps. And we went in September last year and filmed it with a 4-person production crew, me and Marcio, and the 4-person production crew following us in a motorhome through the Alps. And it was amazing. Yeah? So we were able to do the 13 episodes. We spent a month filming in September, and we didn't get great conditions for flying, but they really didn't need it because they kind of turned it into a Mexican soap opera.
Why?
That's basically our. It's just they instead of like the aspect of the adventure, they kind of zoomed in on like what was happening between me and Marcio. You know, like our discussions, our relationship during the traversing all the Alps, hiking and flying and everything. So, you know, it became more of like a soap opera kind of thing than like an adventure program, which is cool because I think it'll be a lot more attractive to not the flying community, but, you know, this program isn't for the flying community. You know, the flying community here in Brazil is, 10,000 pilots. It's going to go towards hopefully the 500,000 people that like to watch this program, and I think they'll be more entertained by in that sense than just the adventure program. We hope. Huh? It's pretty funny. I've seen so far they've edited 5 episodes. I've seen 2, and they're really good. We were flying with 5 cameras. We had the magnet camera in the glider looking down on us. We had a fly cam attached to the point of the glider, filming way behind from our side. We had a camera in our instrument panel looking at us. We had a shoulder camera, and we had a 360 out on a selfie stick. So the images are amazing, and we had, 2 big cameras on every takeoff, on some at the landings also. So it was a really professionally made, soap opera.
Well,
so
but
I think
most of this constructions was designed by Marcio. He puts a lot of time into creating this.
Marcio's amazing. He's
Thanks.
he's a really attention to detail person, and he made some really nice things to carry the cameras in the glider. So hats off to him. He did a great job with that. And,
So anybody
we had a great time.
Anybody who could look up at the Instagram on Marcio Pinto, his tandem business in Rio de Janeiro, you will see a lot of amazing photos he does when he's tandem flying. So then you have a little try of this, what's going to be shown in the off-channel series soap opera.
And so hopefully they're finishing all the editing by May, and hopefully the program will come out like into May, maybe June. And
awesome.
it'll be on the TV program, and I'm sure after it's on the TV program, we'll be able to get it onto YouTube probably around August or something like that. August, September.
They don't have like this how you call it, when a TV have this online screening about of the shows?
Yeah, so Canal Off has an application for your phone, but I think they just show clips of stuff. They don't show the full program.
Ah, okay.
I believe. I don't
And
know.
it will be
I'll
for
check
sure
into
in
that a little bit.
Portuguese, unfortunately.
Yeah, it'll be in Portuguese, unfortunately. But hopefully I'll be doing some more work with the producer about some hike and fly stuff. And we'll be able to do something more like a documentary with subtitles in English.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to see that.
I am too. I'm excited. I've done a lot of TV here in Brazil, but this is the first one I actually got paid for. So
I'm trying
that helped out a lot.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
And it was cool also because I was able to get Anna on the production crew as the tandem pilot that was taking the cameraman with her flying alongside us. So
right.
Actually got her on the payroll also, so that was great.
Yeah. For many people who don't, like, Marcio used to compete back in 2005, 6, 7, like for a few years. So that's why I met him and I know him. Yeah. But when I've heard that you're gonna sleep in tents and like cross Europe sleeping in tents, I was already like,
yeah, it's not Marcio's profile.
Marcio in tents. I want to see it.
Yeah. That's part of the reason I say it's more like a soap opera than an adventure program. For sure.
All right.
But he did good. Marcio sucked it up a little bit. He sucked it up. He did good.
You toughen him up. So what would be
the trip did?
Yeah, so awesome. So we have covered this part. So if anybody of you is interested in going with this crazy guy, no, not so crazy, but interesting character for trying how it is hike and fly in Brazil, I'm super excited about your project, and maybe I would like to join you one day for that, because I believe there are so many beautiful places, and as you know, I'm super into hike and fly as well when I'm not competing. Actually, I prefer that than going on solo cross country. Probably. So for sure, good luck on that. And
yeah, let's do it.
What do you have, like, if you would have like best advice to newcomer pilots coming into paragliding now and thinking what to do, how to go?
You mean a new pilot that's interested in, like, in what, just to learn how to fly, or wants to compete, or wants to do like X Alps or something like that? What?
Yeah, let's start with, they just, like, you know, started flying first XCs, and they're thinking whether to compete or not, you know, how to develop their skills. What would be the best advice you could give?
I mean, I don't know what direction you're talking about, but I mean, just, I think any pilot that wants to like get to his best level of flying, I think first of all, while he's starting his flying, it's good to be around, not for him to actually do acro, but to be around the acro pilots that teach him the skills to have good control of your glider. I think I see a lot of good competition pilots come from that background, you know, like Felix Rodriguez, Paul Takat,
Pitocco.
You know, yeah, Pitocco. So you see a lot of good competition pilots coming from that background, because it gives you a good stability as far as like in your flying. You know, you know how to deal with the glider in any kind of situation. And then the next thing is just to, you know, once you get to a certain level, is not exactly you have to compete, but go to competitions and fly around the competition pilots to learn how to fly fast, fly better, you know, how to make the best performance out of your glider, you know. One thing that we're learning is just from the two-liners nowadays is just how much different the performance is when you're like letting the glider fly. You know, you thought like you could be hanging on the bees a little bit, but just the weight of your hands on the bees is taking away the performance of your glider. And some people are even pushing those bees forward. to actually take zero weight off of them. So I think there's just so much to learn at a competition. I'm not saying each pilot has to compete. I don't think that's not the competition isn't for everybody. So I'm definitely not saying you have to do that, but you definitely want to go near the competitions to see how those pilots are flying, because there's so much to learn at these competitions of how these pilots are flying. And then, it's the same thing as your diet, the same thing as how you should do anything in your life. You have to feel what you want inside from your heart, your soul, and inside your relationship, inside your paragliding career, inside every factor of your life. You got to feel what you have inside you and go after that. Don't let this influence, the society, take you to a spot that's not you.
That's a very good point. Like really search deep into you. What is a real you? What you want? What you seek in life?
Babe. Soul searching.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very difficult thing nowadays, I think, because we are just living in this constant noise of influencers, Instagram stuff, and choice commercials, chasing after after something and not even realizing if it was our dream, our parents' dream, or is just like something what the society is pushing on us. And I have a little bit of feeling that many pilots who live this lifestyle, what we live with you, we are paragliding bums basically, just earning money to go to new place to fly, to compete, to have new adventure. We're kind of out of this scam.
For sure. Beautiful lifestyle.
Not for everybody as well. Many people,
yeah,
I know many people
sure.
who need this stability and security and safety. But the question is, if it's coming from your inside, or is it something what is pushed on you from outside? And even in competing, I was motivated so many years with outside factors. And I needed, unfortunately, a year of depression to realize that you have to search inside you what you really want. Yeah,
for sure. But I don't know if I agree that it's more difficult nowadays. I think it's always been difficult to get away from society. There's so many more influences around nowadays because of internet, but the internet can also be something really positive, because you can get onto the internet and find things that aren't around like for someone who grows up in a small place, that's hard to like get influences from around the world. All of a sudden you have the internet and all those influences are there if you search for them. I think the problem they had 30, 50, 100 years ago, they still have today. All you got to do is break that shell of like, I have to be exactly what everyone around me is. You just have to break that. As soon as you break that shell and you decide, I want to do what I want to do, and you look deep inside your soul and you find it and go after it, it's as easy today to do it, maybe even easier to do nowadays than it was before.
More accepted, maybe even in some places, not everywhere still, but in some places it's more accepted to be individual. Like when I've grown up, we knew that London, if you are like some kind of individual, London is the place to go, because there, if you even go naked on the street, nobody will look at you, because it's like, okay, this is how he feels. He wants to walk naked on the street today, so he's doing it, and try
Where's
to do
that?
the same.
I want to go there.
London, in London.
You can walk naked on the street. I was there. I didn't see anybody
it's
walk
like
around naked.
over accelerator, of course, but the colorful, like breaking out culture was there, and now it's slowly expanding all over Europe. There are still some places which are ultra conservative, and it's hard to go out of the scam, but for sure it's changing.
Yeah.
So it's really nice thing to see. So
and we're happy about it.
Yeah, I have a problem with Zoom. I'm trying, like, there are some people willing to join, and I'm trying to join them, and it's not working. Okay. We will see.
Well, that's
Anyway,
okay. We're at the end anyway, so.
yeah, we are at the end. So if somebody is not feeling like competition, like he tried a few times, I've heard all the time, well, I tried flying competition, it's not for me. There's all ego motivated people and this, like pushy thing. It's not, I feel intimidated and scared. So what kind of other way you see for those people?
Yeah, well, like I was saying, you don't have to compete. I'm saying if you go to a competition, you're going to learn a lot of stuff, from those pilots. But, if you don't want to even go to a competition, I can't talk about Europe or the US or anything like that, but here in Brazil, it's really cool. We have we just have so many, because of the cross country world record being done here in Brazil, we have a huge influence of people wanting to fly XC, so I think pilots, as soon as they get to an intermediate level here in Brazil, they already want to send it, and that's cool, so just find a good community. There's so many people here in Brazil that don't care anything about competing. All they want to do is just have that experience of cross country flight. And so you find those communities here, go after the people, find the ones that have your same vibe, and join those people, because flying by yourself, I spent my first 2 years of flying by myself,
Mm.
and that just made me so slow my first 2 years. I didn't learn anything my first 2 years of flying. I was flying in Cusco by myself because no one flies solo out there, and that was a really scary place. I was just getting hammered all the time there, and then I'd come to Brazil, and I was busy during the summer working my restaurant, and I'd go to fly a little bit and starting to meet people, but I wasn't a good pilot, so I wasn't really getting anywhere. So my first 2 years were really slow. So I think basically when you're beginning, you really need to be around some pilots that are above your level. And here in Brazil, we're really lucky because you find any community you want. You find the community that just wants to take off, fly locally and land. You're going to find the people that want to do some nice, cool, mellow XC, and you're going to find the people that are taking it to the next level. So we have all of that here in Brazil. Whatever you're looking for, you're going to find. So go out and find that community, because flying by yourself in the beginning, you're just going to go really slow on your evolution of your flight. For sure.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. It's a good advice. And how was for you moving to this totally other world of X-Alp? I mean, this is like totally different style of flying. It's like ultra on paraglider. Like you
Yeah, it wasn't really a different style for me, because since when I began flying, I started competing in adventure races. So I represented Brazil in the Discovery Channel Eco Challenge back in '99 in Patagonia. Yeah, that was huge. You know who organized that? That was Mark Burnett. He's the guy who organizes. He's the guy who produces the Survivor. I was invited to the first Survivor to come and do an interview to be on that first Survivor program because I met him at the Eco Challenge in Patagonia. So he invited me to try out for the first Survivor episode, and that must have been like 2001, I think. So yeah, the Discovery Channel Eco Challenge was like probably the biggest adventure race in the world at the time. And then I competed in a bunch of World Series adventure races. And the adventure races are like even maybe a little bit more insane than the X-Alps, because, they're multiple day just like that, but you don't sleep. So, you don't have a thing where you have to lay down and sleep. So you're racing for maybe 7-10 days. You're sleeping an hour a night, and it's multiple disciplines. So you're trail running, you're mountain climbing, you're kayaking in whitewater, you're mountain biking. So you're doing everything. And it was really intense. I guess the first X-Alps, they also had it where you didn't have to sleep. So that was pretty crazy, because, it's insane in the X-Alps when you're not sleeping. Nowadays, I think you have to stop for 4 hours. At least when I did it, you did 6 hours. Now, yeah. So when I did it was 4 hours, I think. You had to stop at midnight and you could get going at 4 a.m. Yeah. And I think on the 6th or 7th day I was flying, I crossed a ridge near Lugano, I think it was, or Locarno. And I took off from a mountain, crossed the valley early, maybe like at 9:30 in the morning, and I was able to ridge soar this ridge on the other side of the valley for like 45 minutes. But it was just back and forth on like a 300-meter ridge for maybe like a half hour, and it was so boring. And I was just waiting for the thermals to start, but I didn't want to land because I'd have to hike up a mountain. So I sat there and ridge soared, and within like a half hour, all of a sudden I woke up to beep beep. So I fell asleep ridge soaring. It was the scariest thing that ever happened to me. And the variometer woke me up. And I mean, I was like, 50 meters from the ridge.
Shit,
it was insane, So it's really scary to be doing an adventure race and fly because it's easy to fall asleep. Once during an adventure race in the Amazons, it was the EMO, and it was a world circuit race. And we were maybe like 8th day, and it was a 150-kilometer part where we're mountain biking on this flat, like dirt road. And it was so boring. It was at night. We're pedaling through the night. And it was maybe 2 hours into the pedaling. And I just woke up with my face hitting the dirt. So I fell asleep bicycling. I woke up with my face just hitting the dirt, So adventure racing is really insane when you're doing things that can really hurt you if you fall asleep, because it's easy to fall asleep doing anything.
Oh my
So
God.
I was pretty much used to adventure racing when I went to the X Alps. The thing that most hindered me in the X Alps was flying in the Alps, because I'm not used to flying those types of mountains. There's so many strange convergences with winds and stuff, and it's hard for us here in Brazil to understand those. And so that's the part that was most difficult for me. It was just the technical flying in the Alps. We didn't have really great weather, so only Mauro was able to take advantage of the big flights during the X Alps that I was in.
Was it the first year when Mauro was competing? Which year did you do?
No, it was his second year, I think, 2011. Peter, I don't never get his last name right, Grushberger or something. Peter from Skywalk. I forget his last name. But I think he's from Austria. He did some amazing flights too that year.
You mean Paul Guschelbauer?
Paulo, yeah. It's
Okay.
Paulo, right? Yeah.
Paul Guschelbauer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, he
that
killed
was
it too.
that was in the
was
only
his first year.
competitor. That was the only competitor of Kriegel that year, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So he crushed it too.
Yeah, it's difficult. When it's bad weather in Alps, you walk a lot and it's killing you.
Yeah. Well, it's not that it was like bad weather. It was just strong winds, a lot of days of strong winds and some bad weather.
I remember that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were some
and
pilots
took
pulling
off some
out.
Insane.
Yeah, there were many pilots pulling out because they didn't want to take the risk.
I mean, the one day on launch, I think it was the 3rd or 4th day, and Mauro took off, and I think you had like Mike Kung was on launch, and he tried to launch, and I guess he blew it and packed up and left. And there's 8 pilots on the same launch, and no one took off, only Mauro. So I mean, that just and the level that was on launch was pretty insane. So yeah, it was a difficult X Alps, I think, for flying.
Yeah, sure. Would you do it again?
I would have the past years. Now I don't think with my age now, 52, I don't think I have it in me anymore. I mean, I could go and do it, but I wouldn't be representing Brazil in a good way. I'm looking more forward to influencing some new pilots coming from Brazil that could do it. That's kind of my focus now. So I'm talking to a few right now that are, between 18, 25 years old that are flying really well, and hopefully get them motivated to represent Brazil someday in the X Alps.
Awesome.
Brazil isn't done with the X Alps yet.
Yeah, definitely. But it's a hard race. I think you should, if you want to do good on that, you need to really go to Alps and learn to fly there before you join.
For sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Would you like to add something from you? Maybe you have some thoughts, reflections?
No, that's it. Just, I think that was pretty cool. We talked about the program and stuff, and I got my tours that I'll be doing here in Brazil and in Europe. The Europe one will be more for Brazilians, and the Brazilian one will be more for Americans or Europeans that would like to come down and try some of the stuff we have down here. So check it out. Get in contact with me about that, and I'll show you some beautiful things about Brazil.
When we have the YouTube, when I put it on YouTube, I'm gonna put your website in the below, so anybody who would like to have a look can follow up and get go and see there.
Yeah.
So definitely was amazing because you have such a holistic approach to flying from every side, from mental through trainings to thinking about other stuff like nutrition, spiritual, and balancing. So it was a big pleasure to talk with you, and I hope our listeners get a lot of good knowledge and input out of this talk, and I really look towards see you in live.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I hope if anybody has any questions or wants to talk to me about anything, they can get in contact directly with me. It's always a pleasure to help people with things. Huh?
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.